Math with Miss Swartz. Today we're going to move forward and we're going to be looking at solving one-step inequalities. So yesterday we had a quick intro. Hopefully that was really simple. My hope would be that you already know that information, but it's a good review and good refresher. Today as well should be pretty simple. It should be a review. It should also look very similar to something we just did with equations. So my hope is today would be pretty simple as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. This is really the only thing that for notes that you have to write down, but solving one-step inequalities is just like solving equations. So number one, the goal is to get the variable alone on one side, and we're going to use inverse operations to do that. So that probably sounds very familiar. This is exactly what we were doing with equations. The only major difference we have with inequalities is this one extra rule that we have. It says for number two, if you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number, okay, we're going to flip the inequality symbol, and we're going to do some examples of that. So it's only when we're multiplying and dividing, and it's only when we're multiplying and dividing by a negative number. And then after every inequality, we're going to do what we practiced yesterday, and we're going to graph those inequalities, because that's how we're able to see the solution set the best. Okay, so after you write this down, we just have a bunch of examples today. And I'm going to do a few, you're going to do a few, and we'll go from there. So let's jump into our first example here. So we have x minus 12 is greater than 32. So we want to make this so that x is alone. So it looks like what we had yesterday when we were graphing inequalities. So I want to get x alone, and I need to use my inverse operations to do that. So if I'm subtracting 12, the inverse of subtraction would be addition. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides of the inequality, just like we did with equations. If I want to keep my inequality true, I have to do the same thing to both sides. So when I do that, my 12's cancel, so I have x is greater than, well, if I add this, I get 44. And now I have the x alone. Now I have what I was looking at yesterday. So I know that my solution set is any number that's bigger or greater than 44. So I want to graph that. So as I said yesterday, we don't have to make these graphs complicated. On your worksheets, they'll give you some graphs, but if you're just making one on your own, I'm going to put 44 in the middle, and I'm going to go a few each way. Okay, so now I have to determine, is it an open or closed circle at 44? In this case, it will be open, because it's not greater than or equal to. And then I have to determine which way I'm shading. My x is on the left, my x is first, so I can look at the arrow here. It's going to be bigger, so I want to shade all the bigger numbers, so this would be bigger. And then we're done. Awesome. So now if we look at this one, we have x divided by 11 is less than 3. Okay, so again, we want to get x alone. Maybe you weren't sure what this dash meant, but here written we can see it's division. So we're going to use the inverse operation. We're going to multiply by 11. So x is less than 33. Now again, we have x alone, and we're able to graph this. We want to graph any number that's less than 33. So I'm going to put 33 in the middle, go a few each way. Open or closed circle is our first question. We're going to have an open circle there. And then which way is it going to be shaded? Well, my variable is on the left, so I can look at the arrow. It's going to be less than. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and try Actually, I want to try this one with you first because it's a little different than what these two have looked like. So we have negative 14 is greater than or equal to y minus 8. Okay, so this is the first time we have not seen the variable on the left. We can either rewrite it here or rewrite it later. I'm just going to rewrite it later, and my whole goal is to get y by itself. So I'm going to add 8 because that's the inverse of subtraction. I need to be careful with my integer rules here. If I'm adding 8 to a negative 14, I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to do 14 minus 8. Okay. So then I would have negative 6 because I'm going to keep the sign of the greater absolute value, which is negative. Keep my symbol the same for now. And I have this. Now, again, we talked about this yesterday in the video. There's nothing wrong with this necessarily, but negative 6 is greater than or equal to y doesn't tell us a lot. So we like to write it so that y is listed first, or a variable is listed on the left. So if y is going to be on the left, we have to consider what would our inequality be. Well, we're going to flip our inequality because if you notice, we want that arrow, we want the pointed part to face y. Y is less than or equal to negative 6. So now that makes our graphing a lot easier. Careful here, you got to work with your negative numbers. And then, do we have an open or closed circle? For the first time we have a closed circle because it's less than or equal to, so it could be negative 6, and it's shaded to the left based on our arrow here. Alright, I'm just going to finish this slide out and then we'll have you try some on the next couple. Because this one is going to be a fraction and I don't want you guys to panic. So here we have 4x is greater than 9. So what is the inverse of multiplication? Well, we're going to divide. Maybe. I can get my pen to work. I'm going to divide by 4. There we go. So I have x is greater than, well, this is just a fraction or a decimal, or if you want to change it into a mixed number, 2 1/4 or 9/4, either way works. And we're just going to graph that. Now you got to be careful on how you separate your pieces here. Maybe you want to go up by 4s. So this would be 2 1/2, and this would just be 2. Okay, if you wanted to go further, that would be fine, but you don't have to. We're going to have an open circle at 2 1/4, and it's going to be shaded to the right because our x is already over here. Awesome. Hopefully you have these examples written down. You're going to get to try some of your own on this next page. Okay, so now we're talking about the number 2 piece on this first one. Okay, so I'm going to have to get c alone here, and what's happening between negative 3 and c? They're being multiplied, so I'm going to divide by negative 3. Here's our first example of dividing or multiplying by a negative number. When we do that, our inequality symbol must flip. 12 divided by negative 4 would be, negative 3 would be negative 4. Okay. Why does it flip? Well, when we're multiplying or dividing by a negative, that always changes the sign of whatever we're working with. Okay. So that's why it flips. We're dealing with a way smaller number or a way bigger number, depending on what we were speaking about previously. So I'm going to graph this. Open circle at negative 4. My variable's on the left, so I can point it the direction that the inequality is going. So I want you to try this next one. Okay, this next one, be careful. Okay, when we're getting y alone, you may or may not be dividing by a negative. Realize you have to divide by a negative. You're not dividing a negative, divide by a negative. Okay, and then make sure that your variable gets on the correct side. So we'll check that one when you come up to check your notes. Okay, let's do one more example together. And I'm going to change this problem a little bit. This is going to be negative 2 is greater than or equal to x over 19. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by 19 on both sides. Now, did I multiply by a negative number here? No, I did not multiply both sides by a negative 19. I multiplied by a positive 19, so I do not need to switch anything. Okay, 2 times 19 is going to give us negative 38. I'm going to leave the sign alone, and we have x by itself. So now x is on the incorrect side, so I'm going to switch that around. Okay, so if negative 38 is greater than or equal to x, x is going to be less than or equal to negative 38. And then I'm going to graph this. So I have negative 38, 37, 36, negative 39. Open or close circle at negative 38 because it's less than or equal to, and it's going to be shaded to the left. Okay, hopefully this one helps your previous one here because it looks a lot like that one. All right, number 2 is the other one I want you to try here. Get x alone and graph it. So you had 2 examples to try. Once you're done with both of those examples, we have a worksheet for you. You can come up and get your notes checked. Have a great day.